If you look at voter registration, you look at the dead people that are registered to vote, who vote. You look at people that are registered in 2 states. You look at all of these different things that are happening with registration. You take a look at those registration, you're going to find, and we're going to do an investigation on it.
But 3 to 5 million illegal votes?
Well, we're going to find out, but it could very well be that much.
Okay, let's just get one thing out of the way. No, we are not going to find out anything about widespread voter fraud. No, there could not be 3 to 5 million illegal votes because this is yet another alternative fact that Donald Trump has made up out of thin air. In fact, the voter fraud claim is so preposterous that Republican lawmakers who are in lockstep with him on everything else are for once choosing truth over Trump.
Does it trouble you that he continues to hold a belief like this that isn't based in fact?
Look, I've already commented on that. I've seen no evidence to that effect, and I've made that very, very clear.
I think this is a huge distraction from really what we ought to be focusing on, which is getting the president and his cabinet so he can get to work for the American people. This really seems like a rabbit trail to me.
This is a president who is claiming electoral fraud in a massive fashion to reconcile the fact that he did not lose the popular vote, when in fact he did. I am begging the president, share with us the information you have about this, or please stop saying it.
That sentiment was echoed even by Ohio Secretary of State John Husted, who has spent a lot of time and tax dollars in a fruitless quest to find systematic voter fraud. Which is why Republicans rejecting Trump's voter fraud lie feels like a whack with the irony stick, because Husted and other Republican-led state governments for years, for decades really, used the myth of widespread voter fraud as a justification for voting restrictions, including 14 new ones enacted in 2016. And joining me now are Dale Ho, director of the Voting Rights Project of the American Civil Liberties Union, and Judith Browne Dianis, executive director of the Advancement Project's National Office. Thank you guys for being here, friends. All right, so first let me read you, Dale, the statement from the National Association of Secretaries of State, and this is regarding Trump's lie that there is widespread voter fraud. They said, "We are not aware of any evidence that supports the voter fraud claims made by President Trump. In the lead up to the November 2016 election, Secretaries of State expressed their confidence in the systemic integrity of our election process as a bipartisan group, and they stand behind that statement today." If Republican secretaries of state like John Husted, who engage in voter restrictions themselves, voter suppression, some would say, are saying there's no voter fraud, where on earth could Donald Trump be getting his alternative facts?
Not from any reputable source. I mean, if his own legal team said last year in a court filing that, quote, all available evidence suggests that the 2016 election was untainted by fraud or mistake. That's a direct quote from the then president-elect's legal team.
Yeah.
Right? So he's not getting this from any reputable source. The only evidence that he points to of potential voter fraud are people who are registered to vote in more than one state.
You mean like his kid?
Happens to be true of Tiffany Trump, Steve Mnuchin, Steve Bannon, Jared Kushner. That's not evidence of fraud. That's evidence of the fact that we live in a mobile society and we have an election system that is decentralized.
And before I go to Julie, can you just explain to people, because what they're talking about is somebody standing in line and voting, and then getting back in line again, and myself going in line after voting as Joy Reid, and then saying, "Hi, I'm Dale Ho, and I'm voting again." Does that ever happen?
Well, there are, I think, a total of a few dozen cases of this happening in the last 50 years, a period of time in which over 1 billion ballots were cast. Last year there were 4 recorded instances of voter fraud, one of which was a woman in Iowa who voted for Trump twice.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. And you know, Judith, one of the things that drives me insane is the low rates of voting once, right? So the Pew Research Center has looked at voting data in developed nations. The United States, we're number 27 out of 35 countries. 27th out of 35 countries. Registered voters here represent a smaller share of our voters than just about any other developed country. We are at the bottom in terms of people voting once. So nobody is doing it twice. People don't even do it one time. But at the same time, when Donald Trump is saying this stuff based on conspiracy theories that he's cooking up from disreputable people, what are the real world threats and implications of him saying that? Because real things could actually happen as a result.
Right. So we need to understand, Joy, that this is really about his ego. This is just like the inauguration numbers. He wants to go out and prove that he had more people. Now he wants to prove that he lost the popular vote because of illegal votes. Well, in fact, there is no evidence of that. And so the real implications, though, are that those who actually do want to make it harder to vote will use this as an excuse in order to pass restrictions in the states. And at the end of the day, you know, we've got to be looking at this as he wants an investigation. We should be saying no to the investigation. When the mayor of Crazy Town asks you to get on the invisible ride, you should say no to that. And I think actually that's what Republicans are saying. Secretaries of state who run the elections, you know, his own legal team, everyone knows that this is propaganda and it must end.
Yeah, and you know, Dale, you know, Brian Stelter, who oversees CNN, we'll give him a shout out. He tweeted that Donald Trump got this from this conspiracy theorist named Greg Phillips, who thinks that Obamacare creates voter registration fraud. He says it on television, and Trump literally tweets. It is as if he's watching TV, he sees a conspiracy theorist say something that's pleasing to him, and then he repeats it. But the real implications of this are that you could see these same secretaries of state who are saying there's no voter fraud suddenly go out and use this as an excuse to really stop people from voting.
I think that's the concern, because throughout history, specious allegations of voter fraud have been used to suppress voting. They were used to justify poll taxes, literacy tests, and now today with strict identification requirements that let you vote if you have a concealed weapons permit, but not a student ID card.
Right. And does the ACLU, do organizations like yours have the resources to go now state to state in potentially 50 or 40 states and fight for the rights to vote when you now do not have a civil rights division of the Justice Department that is on your side, or maybe that will even exist by the time Trump is done?
That's what we have to do. It's going to be really tough. We've gotten a lot of resources pouring in, but we're going to be fighting state to state, county to county against these voter suppression measures. The Department of Justice, which has been a staunch ally in the fight for voting rights over the last 5 years, we just don't know now if they're going to still continue to be that.
Yeah, and Judy, you know, you've had the Trump administration put out a list of parts of the government they'd like to seriously cut funding for or even eliminate. The Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department was on that list. How concerned are you that essentially civil rights groups are going to be fighting with one hand tied behind their back because the federal government, the Justice Department, is now an enemy rather than an ally?
Right. Yes, we've had them as a partner for the last 8 years in a lot of litigation, including the litigation that we did in North Carolina. They were on the right side in Texas, and so we should expect that what they will do is that they will change side in those cases. But also that means for civil rights organizations like ours that we are going to have to be the frontline lawyers, and you know we've been that, but we're going to have to double down on that. We're already starting to see bills in state legislatures cropping up that are about making it harder to vote and voter suppression, and so we're just going to have to fight it, you know, in all 50 states. Fortunately, the federal government will not be on our side.
Yeah, and Dale, lastly, do you think that the rest of the Voting Rights Act is in jeopardy?
I certainly hope not. But, you know, I wouldn't put anything past this administration in terms of non-enforcement. You can kill a statute not by attacking it, but just by refusing to enforce it.
Yeah, this is scary times. Dale Hote, Judith Browne Dianis. Hopefully you guys can come back a lot and we can talk about this more. Thank you very much. And in our next hour, the real-world consequences of Donald Trump's new order banning immigration from 7 Muslim-majority nations. Legal challenges are already being filed, including by the ACLU. Oh, and Donald Trump will be picking up the phone to call Vladimir Putin in a few minutes. That should work out well. Stay with us.